last fall at this time, the economic crisis that we were in, and how people like Terry O'Toole and Ken Valosky and others helped us steer the university through some very challenging, difficult times. And last spring, at a time when many colleges and universities were seeing their endowments plummet and really taking it on the chin on so many levels, Villanova got a report card that I just thought, to the extent you weren't aware of it, you should know that last April, Moody's changed our outlook from stable to positive during a time of economic crisis in this country for a lot of nonprofit institutions. And in doing that, they said that their decision reflected the university's strong fiscal management, which has resulted in strong operating margins and financial resource growth from operations, and has made the university somewhat less vulnerable to market volatility compared to its peers. To get a rating like that in the midst of what was going on last spring is just, I think, a tribute to the sound management that we have at the university. And so I'm pleased to introduce our next panel to talk about the state of the university.
Gary, thank you for your insights. I hear those ideas over and over again, as I've been an Augustinian now for over 30 years, and I never had that image of the deer before. And I kept thinking, here I am forging across a river with a bunch of heads on my rear end. I'm trying to keep my head above water in this whole thing. We're going to just talk a little bit about where we're moving forward and how we're moving forward, and I think it'll capture for all of you, at least I hope it will do, our sense of leadership. And I preface all of this by saying I believe I'm surrounded by a very strong team of people, from all of the vice presidents to the academic deans to the student life people. Everybody has a real commitment to making sure that Villanova continues to move forward. And I think as you heard Father McCluskey talking about Augustine and what the Augustinian nature of it is something that's very important here, is that notion of the restless heart, of always kind of looking forward and looking to a vision of something different. When I came into this position now 4 years ago, there were several things that I felt we needed to kind of capture, and the first thing we actually kind of looked at was the campus plan that we had several new buildings going up, the new Driscoll Hall, the College of Nursing, and the law school was just becoming a realization. And they were certainly going to change the complexion of the campus footprint. The nursing building was actually cited to go into another location here on campus. And I think one of the, well, it was, I don't think, I know it was the first decision I made. I think it was the first week I decided to change the location. After listening to a number of people talk about it, particularly the architects that were involved in it, and what they felt was a very difficult site for it to be built on, and that it was going to cost more money to support the site than it was to build the building. So I felt that we really needed to look at it. I don't think the women's softball team was very happy with me, and so I made my first group of enemies within the first week or so, as they glared at me every time they walked by campus. I had an experience with them that somebody was here and I was showing them on the campus, and we were walking into the varsity workout room that's underneath the stadium, and as I walked in, the women's softball team were all in there working out. And as soon as I walked in, they all went, "There he is." But they got over it, you know, so they moved on from it. But it was an important decision, I thought, to look at where we were situating the building and how we were going to create a gateway to the university. The law school, the decision to put the law school on the university property in what was a parking lot demanded some vision in itself of how we were going to fit all of this in. So I felt that what we really needed to look at was the campus master plan and how we continue to support the academic and resident life here on campus and continue to provide for our students a quality education in up-to-date classrooms and up-to-date living spaces, and that our footprint was getting smaller and smaller. And so we, in we engaged in the process of hiring a company, a firm, that came in and began to help us look at how the campus could grow or continue to grow. And one of the first things I discovered with them was they came and they walked around campus and they said, you realize that the main entranceway to all of your buildings are in the back door, that the university was originally built to face two different directions. One was on Lancaster Avenue, which was a main thoroughfare at the time, and the other one was the railroad station. And a lot of people coming in on the trains, as well as those people driving down Lancaster Avenue, there was a kind of a double entranceway to the university. But as the university has grown, it has spread out into a long line going from Bartley Hall down to Fettigan Hall, and that the traffic now was running in that avenue between the buildings. So all of these wonderful facades for buildings were now not being used, but everybody was walking through the back door of everything. And I thought, we've never really looked at the campus that way. It was always, for us, it was a beautiful spot, and everybody talked about the beauty of the campus. And it was just really interesting to hear a different perspective from somebody else on how they viewed Villanova in terms of its physical plan. So we started this whole process of looking at the physical plan. And with that, I think we came to the realization that we also needed to create a new strategic plan as we moved forward. And how do we meld those two things together? And where do we begin that process? And again, I felt it was important, and with the support of the Board of Trustees, to really look at how we could bring somebody else in here to help us look at ourselves differently. And we went through a process of interviewing various consulting companies and finally decided on McKinsey & Company to help us develop the strategic plan. They were brought in basically to help us get the data we needed in terms of creating the plan. And once that data was gathered and their input was given to us, we knew and we understood that it was our role to begin to craft that plan into something that was right for Villanova. With it, this plan is going to the board next week and in December for final approval, but it is looking at how we position the university for the future. And we have come to discover that many times we as an institution have been very shy about telling our story. We have been very quiet about telling our story, and that a lot of things happen here that we just haven't promoted effectively. And that we are in a position here in terms of all of these academic classifications and rankings as being an institution that is master's comprehensive, located in the northeast section of the United States. And that is really where Carnegie, the people that kind of create these classifications, have situated us. The size we are, the programs we offer, and all of those kinds of things that they take into consideration. It's a much more complicated process that they use in order to evaluate a school or to classify a school, and I wouldn't begin to get into it. It would take forever. But we are, that is our classification. And we really looked at, do we want to move from that position? And in doing that, it would take a lot of energy and effort on our part to kind of elevate Villanova University into a different classification. The Carnegie people come in every once in a while, every 6 years or so, and kind of take a snapshot of the university and say, okay, this is what you are. You have very little input into their classification system. So it is, these are your programs, this is your size, this is what you offer, these are the number of graduates you have, et cetera, and we have now classified you in this realm. To move to another level from them, you really have to demonstrate to them that you've taken on much more effort to elevate yourself into a national prominence. We believe at Villanova, I think as we looked at this plan, that we had the potential to do that. We didn't always have the resources to do it. But I believe that the reputation of the university is much more widespread than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. And that we have made a real effort in terms of our admissions process to kind of expand our geographical footprint in terms of students coming in here. As of today, 60% of our population come from the Northeast Corridor, and that runs from Maine to Virginia. where most of our students come from New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, and a few from Connecticut. But the largest population is still coming from that area. But 40% of our undergraduate population represents all of the other states. This was the first year that we ever had applications from every state in the Union. And so we had people interested in the university. Why that is so, I think there's a lot of factors in that. Yes, there is a certain basketball team that they know very well and has done a great deal for us to promote the image of Villanova or to get the school out there on a more national level. But I also think we have a lot of academic programs that have suddenly gotten the recognition that they deserve. From the business school to the engineering school to the nursing school to many programs within our liberal arts program. Our communication department in liberal arts is very well known. There are some real strong science programs that we have. We have faculty in the astronomy department who have discovered new galaxies. And so there are things that are happening in the university that have really lifted up our academic profile as well. And so the plan really looks at how do we make ourselves more nationally recognized without necessarily going through the very, very expensive steps of trying to become reclassified. And so the strategic plan is actually looking at how do we bring in students from across the country, throughout the world. We have 31, 32 different countries represented on campus now. But how do we continue to elevate the academic profile of our students and also get our value proposition out to a larger section? All the while knowing that there are many schools in the Northeast Corridor that are chomping at our heels and wanting to be #1 by U.S. News and World Report. U.S. News and World Report is now considered like the ranking publication. That in time, we all know, will change. You know, someday U.S. News and World Report will go on and do something else, or somebody else will start evaluating people and suddenly they'll all jump on that bandwagon as well. And there are several publications that rank institutions, but right now it's U.S. News and World that is kind of the #1. But I don't think we need to follow or get caught up in that ranking struggle as much as we need to get caught up and promote our reputation and who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And that we have a very different approach to how we do things. And so in terms of creating this strategic plan, and we've been working on it now for over a year and a half, it really, I've tried to call all of these various segments of our university together to say, how do we, as an institution, really promote Villanova University? And what do we do to get out who we are and what we do with all of these subcategories that go on in the academic world, so that we join our forces together to really project a different vision of who we are and what we are all about. And bringing together that campus master plan, the strength of our academic programs, the quality of our student life programs, and all of the service components that we do, that we really have created, or we continue to create, something that is really the Villanova ideal. And what it means to be a student here, a faculty member here, a staff member here, an alumnus of the university. And having that sense of passion as to what Villanova does differently from everything else. How we distinguish ourselves from everyone else in terms of our educational mission. So the plan is really looking at how do we do that and what kinds of benchmarkings we need to do over the next 5 to 10 years to really kind of elevate our profile. So we're not moving so much in the direction of elevating our ranking or changing our ranking, which would be national doctoral research, but to really keep within the master's comprehensive program, strengthening our graduate programs, possibly looking at some additional graduate programs, but remaining faithful to the core of educating undergraduate students with full-time faculty members who are inspiring educators and really elevating these students to a different sense of who they are. So the plan really looks at how do we elevate ourselves and not necessarily change what we are doing, but strengthening what we are doing. So So that gives you some idea. I can't go into it too much because there's a lot of board members here and they haven't heard all this. So I'm afraid some of them are sitting there going, that's not what he told us. We've done some tweaking of it all. So that's the perspective, or the overall perspective, of the strategic plan and how we're working to do that and gaining that vision. And I'll let Ken and Mike talk about the financial part of it. So.
Let me first just focus on the campus master plan. It's great, as Father said, to have a vision for what the campus should look like and develop over the next 30 years. But to me, the beauty of the campus master plan is that it can be tailored to the circumstances that we face right now in the economy, and also the strategy. We can have alignment of this plan with the strategy. We certainly would have preferred to move forward with a full-blown renovation of Tollentine Hall and also a renovation of the old law school. That would have cost us in excess of $100 million, and we thought that that was not a prudent step for us to take given the economic circumstances that we faced. At the same time, the strategy is, as Father pointed out, in the strategic plan, is to continue to attract students of a very high caliber. And in order for us to do that, while the assumed focus might be on academic facilities, what we saw through the research is that your student amenities must be at some type of basic standard for that to be attractive from a recruitment and a retention standpoint. So given the economy, given that from a recruitment standpoint with regard to our students, the focus became student amenities. And so what we decided to do beginning this summer is we initially focused on a complete renovation of Fettigan Hall, and if you haven't seen it, it certainly will not resemble anything that you may have recalled from your days on campus. Completely air-conditioned, new windows, new bathrooms, sanded floors, just a great experience for our students. In terms of Doherty Hall, we completed for the dining part of that facility an aesthetic renovation inside that we think has completely transformed the eating experience, and I'll base that on some metrics that we see already. Last year, that facility served about 400 lunches and about 500 dinners a day. That volume has doubled, 800 lunches and about 1,000 dinners. So it's not a change in the food that's attracting the students, but certainly the beauty of that facility. And I see some Alumni Association members in the front row here who chastised us last year when we said that the ramp would be removed from Doherty Hall and started the chant, "Save the ramp," but we did decide to remove it. It has, and I think it has completely transformed that facility. And at the same time, we're working right now on reorienting the front of Austin Hall, which is our admissions office, so that people will be able to park across from the main chapel on Lancaster Ave and come up through there and enter through the front of the campus. Certainly, I think a much more scenic entrance for our admissions experience. And we're also right now, finally, as we had promised, upon completion of the law school, restoring the beauty of the front lawn. The temporary parking will be removed, and by the end of October, that should be completed. What do we see in terms of the next 2 years as far as these student amenities are concerned? We will seek board approval on Monday and Tuesday to have a renovation of Sullivan and Sheehan Halls. Those will be air-conditioned, new bathrooms, new windows. It certainly is long overdue, and again, will raise the bar of our student amenities. And then we'll do that over 2 summers. Those buildings will not be taken out of service, and we will cap this whole student experience part of the campus master plan with what we're referring to as the pedestrian experience. We will take from the quad out here this admittedly ugly concrete steps that lead up to Connolly Hall. Those will be completely removed, tree-lined, landscaped. It will go into a reconfigured grotto, and then also into an expanded Mendel field. Traffic will not be permitted from about, I would say, Core Hall on this side of the campus, and then from Tolentine and the monastery on the other side. Obviously, we'll have access for emergency vehicles, et cetera, but there will be no cars permitted on campus. And so we really think that coming out of this 3-year process, when the economy, as you know, has been in dismal shape, the recovery is anticipated to be slow and long, we will make demonstrable progress to people. They will be able to see a transformed inner core of the campus that we think will be able to enhance our recruitment efforts and certainly will be aligned with the strategic plan. At that point in time, we'll see where our resources stand. We'll see what has been the effect of our fundraising efforts, and at that point, we'll consider where do we move forward. But again, it's the beauty of this campus master plan. It's flexible. We're able to maintain the integrity if we decide in a few years to move forward with Tolentine and the law school. We certainly will not have made any decisions that preclude us from doing that.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Before I dive into my piece of the conversation, I couldn't help but thinking as Ken and I are sitting here flanking Father Peter, laid out in our blue uniforms and crisp white shirts, that we were not unlike Secret Service agents guarding him wearing a wire. So don't do anything foolish. And for those of you who think that Ken and I look alike, and we've heard that a lot in the past 15 months or so, particularly when we dress the same, a couple of things I should point out. Ken is slightly shorter, slightly older, and much, much grayer. So,
better looking.
And better looking. So,
and thinner.
And thinner.
Thank you.
I had initially decided to take a very different approach to the approach I'm going to take this morning, and perhaps assault you with numbers and talk about a lot of the processes we're trying to put into place, and for sure I will do some of that. But I was really taken by the opening presentations yesterday and a lot of the conversation throughout the day and through the dinner. I've spent about 20 years in higher education and nonprofit sectors. And after listening to John Paul Jones's keynote address yesterday, my first reaction was, my God, there sure is a lot of sand and gravel in higher education. And in fact, it immediately reminded me of Henry Kissinger's famous quip that university politics are so vicious precisely because the stakes are so small. But the stakes here, as all of you know, and certainly those of us who work for the university know, the stakes are actually quite high. And then as I sat listening to Jim Brown talk about his own background, currently as the chief of staff to Senator Casey, but also in his life, previous life as a venture capitalist, that taken together, politics and venture capitalism has a lot to do, is very similar to higher education fundraising, or at least particularly what we're trying to accomplish, philanthropically speaking, here at Villanova. So if you look at politics, or how I might define politics in its ideal, and Paul, you can disagree with me on this, but it can be described as service to and advocacy for specific constituencies. Then if you look at venture capital at its most basic, it's about sifting through the wheat and the chaff of ideas and concepts to find those worthy of investment, resulting hopefully in measurable gain. So to make a correlation to development at Villanova, what we hope to accomplish is really about equal parts constituency building, and not venture capital, but venture philanthropy. So what do I mean by this? On the constituent building side, one's relationship with their alma mater, by the very definition of alumnus, means that it should be a mutual beneficial relationship. So the value of your degrees that have increased exponentially in value since the days of your commencement, whether or not the Villanova network has helped you get your first job or switch careers, and certainly establish long-standing relationships and friendships. The fact that Villanova has created a tradition of legacy, where alumni sons and daughters comprise significant portions of each year's incoming class, and just fielding the phone calls from March to May, the hot cycle part of the admissions process, I think we can easily confirm that. And then on a less tangible but very, very real part, those points of pride that deepen one's connections to the university. Whether the College of Engineering has a top 10 ranking or a Final Four berth during March Madness. Those deepen our relationships with our alma mater. But in return, Villanova should expect not merely your dollars, and we do expect your dollars, but your ongoing investment, financial and otherwise, because we believe we're a noble and sound institution. So if you go back to the concept of venture philanthropy for a moment, if you look at our Augustinian and Catholic heritage, that's a differentiator for us in the marketplace. It's what separates us from the roughly 3,000 institutes of higher education in the United States. We've heard a lot of talk about Veritas, Unitas, and Caritas, not only this morning, but throughout the course of the day, and indeed it's something that we hear on a daily basis, and we believe it's not merely a slogan or a marketing ploy. Those represent our core principles. The strategic plan of the campus master plan that are being wed together and is being led by Father Peter is our business plan for the future, which we believe is distinctive, but we also believe and know, and Ken will attest to this, it's going to require significant new capital to actualize this vision. And the brunt of that capital, frankly, is going to come from private gift support. So we're looking for alumni leaders like you who can be both ambassadors and constituent builders as well as investors in the university. We need your leadership to help us engage a broader spectrum of alumni in the life of the university. And in return, we need to be much more aggressive in the frequency and articulation of our goals and needs, and frankly, just what our expectations are in that mutual beneficial role that we share for those who comprise and benefit from membership in the Villanova community. So let me assault you with some numbers or processes just for a few moments. Some examples. And speaking of leadership, we're going to be creating a new volunteer initiative in January, launching it called the President's Leadership Council. We're looking to assemble a group of 40 or 50 alumni, well-placed, high-caliber alumni who are experts in their own fields, who can assist Father Peter and the university with some very important strategic initiatives. So greater alumni interaction in the admissions process, more access and entree to corporate foundations and corporate relations, mentoring and career planning and placement for our students and our young alumni. All these, and last but not least, I can't believe I almost forgot it, fundraising. Speaking of the strategic plan, as Father mentioned, it's coming into its final focus. There'll be ongoing discussion with the board this Monday and Tuesday with the hopes that in December the board will authorize it and endorse it. From there, we will spend the first half of 2010 and taking what I call the saleable highlights, or what we think are the saleable highlights of the strategic plan, and we'll begin testing those highlights with our top 2,500 donors and prospects. And we'll do that in a variety of ways. We'll conduct leadership dinners, follow-up one-on-one interviews, telephone interviews, online surveys, and the like. The whole idea is that we're going to enable our alumni who can help us make a difference to digest and react to the strategic plan and help us revise it to make sure that what we think are the saleable highlights are indeed the saleable highlights. And then we can go back to those same alumni and ask them to support it accordingly. Another example, and two things really that we're looking to really drive home, and I know a lot of you will kind of shake your head when I talk about the number. I came to Villanova about 14 or 15 months ago. And as I've said to several people in this room, usually you meet disgruntled alumni first. That's just the nature of the business. I don't think I've met 10 disgruntled alums in the time I've been here. Villanovans are very confident with where Villanova's at, where it's heading, and in its leadership. There's a tremendous amount of pride and enthusiasm, but it hasn't always translated, and it hasn't translated into comprehensive support. Right now, our alumni participation rate, as many of you know, lags significantly behind those of our peers and our aspirants. We hover usually around 17 to 18%, while our aspirants are in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. You know, at first we can look at that sort of pessimistically and say, how come? You know, this only 2 out of every 10, less than 2 out of every 10 alumni are choosing to give. Well, the fact of the matter is the onus is on the institution as well. No matter how much somebody loves an institution, you don't get if you don't ask. And we need to be much more aggressive in asking, and we will. So for instance, our telefund this year, in past years, the telefund effort was a 6-month-a-year program. we were giving away half the year. This year it'll become a 10-month program. Likewise with our annual fund program, our direct mail program rather, where, and I'm sure some of you have been witness to this, where perhaps you've received a V Club solicitation, a university appeal letter, and perhaps a dean solicitation within a handful of days of each other, and say, the only time you hear from Villanova is when they want my money. On the plan giving side, plan giving is a real cost-effective way, probably the most cost-effective way to raise money. And part of what we're looking to do this year, and we'll do so in November, is relaunch the 1842 Heritage Society. We've already begun taking some of those steps. In fact, 80 new alumni have indicated to us, verifiably indicated to us, that Villanova is a part of their estate planning. So if you look at the historical data of what the average bequest that comes into the university, it tends to average around $75,000. So right there alone is about $6 million that will come to Villanova at some point in the future. Beyond just wills and bequests, they're revocable, so you can't bank on those. There are other plan-giving vehicles as our alums are considering their estate plans that can be very, very helpful, and we'll begin to market them much more aggressively. Let me give you one example. We'll soon be announcing, so we won't share the person's name, but we had a donor recently, just this closed in September, a very modest but consistent annual fund donor who just closed a charitable remainder unit trust that has a net present value of $3.3 million. And if it's tended to carefully, when that is ultimately received by Villanova, it should be worth between $8 and $10 million. So it's wonderful for Villanova. There was tax advantages and retirement planning incentives for the donor, but it also allowed somebody who was, as I said, a very modest but consistent giver to make a transformative gift to their alma mater. Internally, and I include our volunteers as sort of the internal community at Villanova, we need to lead by giving. When we're approaching foundations or corporate foundations, they often ask, what percentage of your board donates? What percentage of your alumni donate? It's a weighted measure. As much as we wish that U.S. News & World Report wasn't a part of the everyday fabric of university life, it's a 5% weight in terms of the rankings. So we need to look at all of our volunteers, whether you're board of trustee, and I'm happy to say, and it has been a long tradition, that the board has 100% support giving every year. Our Alumni Association board as well. I know that was a big drive last year as Paul was took on his presidency. But our regional volunteers, our Dean's Advisory Boards, our affinity groups like the Financial Club, we have to strive for 100% participation. How can we expect our 100,000 alumni to donate if our leaders aren't taking that lead role? I'm not on some kind of Henry Kissinger kick, but I would like to sort of draw to a conclusion with one final quote from him. He said, if 80% of your sales come from 20% of your items, just carry that 20%. And like sales and fundraising, there is an 80-20 rule. 80% of your gifts will come from roughly 20% of your people. And at Villanova, that has historically and drastically been the case. If you look at the last campaign, which closed in December of 2007, it was hugely successful. It raised a record $303 million for Villanova. Consider this. I want to make sure I get the numbers right. 51% of that total, $154 million, came from just 57 people. It's staggering, really. But look at the flip side. The remaining $149 million was raised through gifts by literally thousands and thousands of alumni. So unlike Kissinger's assertion, Villanova needs to stock its shelves with donors of every stripe and variety. I think, if we go back to the alumni participation number, think about what Villanova can accomplish if we can raise that alumni participation rate from its current 17 or 18% to 20%, to 25%, to 30%, and beyond. Donors who are captured young become habitual, elevated, and major givers over time. As I mentioned with the plan giving vehicle, consistent annual fund donors make excellent plan giving prospects. And major donors who have the capacity to make 7- and 8-figure gifts to an institution can literally transform Villanova overnight. So my point is that every alumnus who reaps the benefits of being a part of the Villanova community can, and I would suggest should, be a well-informed ambassador and an impact investor in Villanova's future.
When we talk about leadership, I really appreciated all the comments yesterday, but I also see as part of our responsibility is to be that Augustinian kind of the thrust of being visionaries and looking at how do we not remain complacent, but how we continue to be restless to create something new. And I look at just the history of the university, and having this position, I've had to kind of take a step back at times and really look at how we have grown and what we have done. And I look at various people across the course of this history of the university, from Patrick Moriarty and Thomas Kyle, who borrowed the $18,000 the night before this place went up on the auction block to buy it, to Father Fettigan, who built Tallentine Hall and was referred to as Fettigan's Folly, to the dedication and the ability to kind of take a real forefront stand on bringing in GIs after World War II, of creating the Navy Reserve program here, of building various buildings along the way and really structuring Villanova in a certain way, that the Augustinians and the other men and women who joined them in building this university, as I look back upon the Moriartys and Fettigans and Sullivans and Sheehan's and all of those individuals whose names occupy many of our buildings, I think that they would never have looked at Villanova at that time and said, this is exactly what we want it to be, but always we wanted it to be more. And that they would, if they saw Villanova today, I don't think they'd say, oh, I'm surprised what happened to it. I think they'd say, I knew it would happen. And that's what I believe my role and many of my administrators' role is to continue to do at Villanova, is to say we can be better and we can do more and we can create the Villanova that many people believe needs to be created. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think at this time we'd open the floor up to questions, and we'd ask you to use the microphone so that we can capture the questions on the tape. So, questions from the audience. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I have some regard, some prepared statements.
Oh, that always scares me.
So that's,
You have your
I say
security.
prepared
Remember,
because I
there's
want to read
security
them.
here, Rich.
First of all, Michael, with regard to financial restructuring, we should always be, not knowing what you're going to say, these are my prepared remarks. We should always be mindful of our goals and not become frustrated, so as not to become involved in a race for the bottom. What I think that brings me to is another prepared remark where more of our CEOs should remain attracted to what their goals and values are of Villanova and should be brought in to the mix in a greater way. They should become advocates for us when they're on TV, when they're making remarks to the press. It's something they have to consider based on what their business is. But that has to be something that I think would help us tremendously. As would help us tremendously is more of our educators, our professors, being out front, getting the institution better focused on who we are, what we're doing. And I had the opportunity of being able to name a building after my family. I prefer to name it after an intellectual scholar, which I'm not. And I think it paid tremendous dividends for me, because when that professor goes out to the public, we now have people who are willing to endow in our future for the students who come from now 40 countries. And that's how I think we're going to get them, is by better educators, professors that love it here, and always under the guidance, never, true to the value of the Augustinian value. So I believe that those are some of the areas, and we have to always maintain our thought about the green area. Too many buildings is not too better. It's not better. I think bigger is not better, is what my words were. And I basically feel that we are strong, and we have to get back on track, and we have to get those students that just graduated thinking of $100. Get them on board, because that's how I started. I'm a class of '54. I gave $5. I gave $10. But I never stopped giving. So I think if we attract them, then they'll come on board, because then they're going to become the leaders that we're hopeful that they learned here at Villanova, and be willing to participate in the program. We should not leave them out. My one example is we should go to CEOs. I know of a CEO, I'm in healthcare on a voluntary basis. There's a CEO of one of the largest hospitals, White Plains Hospital in New York. He's a Villanova graduate. No one knows he's a Villanova graduate. He has more input. He could do more things. I sat at a table recently and said, "What are you doing for Villanova?" He looked at me. You know? I mean, there are people out there, we have to find them. And you're doing a great job, but let's not stop. Let's continue to get them. And I wish you all the luck in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's safe to say that we will track him down very quickly, Richard, so thank you.
Somebody just
I
left
think
the room
Tony
to call.
over here.
Father, you articulated the different attributes of a national recognition as a university versus a regional recognition. But I'm not sure, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear you say which of those categories we aspire to, and what are we working towards?
Well, I think the steps we want to take first is to improve our national reputation. Down the road, I think certainly as we build up more resources, we can consider putting those things in place that would change our classification to a national university. But in the research that we've done and the data that we've received, right now we are in a position that it would be extremely difficult for us to kind of break into that top 50 number, because we don't have the amount of research going on here and the kind of facilities for research and the faculty gaining that kind of grant money to do research that would place us where the two that are really in those categories right now, Catholic schools, or three I should say that are in those categories right now, are Notre Dame and Georgetown and Boston College. We compete with Boston College for students right now. Our numbers are very similar. But there is a level of research that the Carnegie looks at that we would not be able to accomplish right now, as well as doctoral programs. And doctoral programs are very expensive to create, and the number of doctoral candidates that you are graduating on a yearly basis. We don't have those things in place right now to kind of jump that, and I'm not, and I think a lot of people, as we talked about the strategic plan, we're not really excited about going into a different classification that was not going to put us in that top tier. So to go from #1 Northeast region to number 260 national, we didn't feel was a real good move to make.
I'm not advocating one or the other.
Yeah.
Father, I'm not advocating one or the other. And I'm pleased to hear you talk about the different attributes that, or characteristics that schools must have in pursuing one or the other. Mm-hmm. And I think it has to be a very well thought out mission if in fact we want to move from one category to another. And thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Father, you mentioned the changing geography of the population of incoming students, and we've, so just as an observation, we've struggled to stay in touch with some of our alumni, and even though they've been concentrated, and now we're going to have a population that's increasingly more and more dispersed. How is the university thinking about that connectedness, and how do we, as we send graduates out that are potentially going back home,
right.
What types of things do you need from current alumni, and then second, what changing strategies have you thought about as far as how to stay connected and get more deeply connected with a very dispersed population?
It's a good question. I think part of the growth geographically in the university, or the interest geographically in the university, has really come from alumni who are now dispersed in different parts of the country as well as different parts of the world. I was absolutely amazed 2-3 years ago when we went to Ireland and England to the alumni associations there. And Ireland was kind of like, well, of course we'd go to Ireland. You know, half the names on the buildings are Irish, you know. And, but the majority of the alumni at the event were Americans who are now working in Ireland. And it was even more so in London, where we had quite a large turnout, and we were rather surprised at it. There were probably about 60 to 70 alums that showed up at this reception in London who are all now working there. And as they have migrated out to different areas, our 4th largest alumni base right now is California. And it's just as people have migrated to other areas of the country with other jobs and to the Southwest and to the West Coast, they have told people about Villanova and have been very proactive in terms of our admissions office of getting that word out and represent us at college fairs and all of those kinds of things. So it's a matter of, you know, using social networking more effectively, using our website more effectively, me getting a private plane. You know, it would be, you know, and I'll give you a ride on it. It's all right. You can ride every once in a while. But it's how, and I realize that. I said it in my inauguration, that I understand that my role is to be the face of the university, and that I need to get out there, and I trust the people that are here leading the university or working at the university to kind of move it on. But in today's world, a president of a university or college is really expected to almost be out 50% of their time doing those kinds of things. So it's how do we continue to facilitate those gatherings of people together. We have a lot of alumni and sports events, but you know, there's other things we can do, and not everybody's, I hate to say it, not everybody is interested in basketball, you know, so there are other ways of getting, now don't tell Jay I said that when he comes in later, but there are other ways of kind of gathering alumni together, and we need to be more proactive in terms of doing that through our publications and the technology that we have in place. Yes, Al? I love the way Gary just stays in one place. Charles does all the running around. True leadership.
Delegation. Father, this is not meant as a criticism, but it's really more of an encouragement of some of what's been happening and encouragement to do even more. And that is vis-a-vis the Catholic and Augustinian identity of this university. And I would hope that in the strategic plan, and I can assume that there's something significant in there for continued identification as this is an Augustinian community. Georgetown was mentioned so many times, and I don't know how true this is, but I heard a couple of months ago that there was a survey taken of current Georgetown students, and some very significant number of them were unaware that it was a Catholic university. Mm-hmm. And that stunned me, and I just hope that never happens here, and that we use that as it is one of our great strengths and promote it locally, nationally, but most certainly on campus, so that we never have a single student at Villanova who is not aware of that.
I totally agree with you. And it is something that we promote consistently. This year, Dr. Barbara Wall, who is, I've changed a position that she was in from assistant to the president for mission effectiveness, that she now has the title of vice president of mission and ministry. And we've consolidated campus ministry, peace and justice, the Augustinian Institute, all of that under that vice president in order to promulgate and push forward our identity as a Catholic Augustinian institution. It is there all the time. Just a side note, I was talking to a group of students and I was asking them exactly why they came here and why they chose Villanova. And many of them said it was because it was a Catholic institution. And one person in the group said, you know, when I first came on campus, I never realized it was a Catholic school. And the rest of them all looked at him and said, what are you, blind? You know, there is crosses everywhere, statues of everywhere, and there's men running around in black dresses. Come on. So they were, but we've maintained, and you know, there's a whole thing with how admissions are done, but the population of the university is still 75% Catholic. So at least they claim to be. And it is, you know, we do a lot in terms of our campus ministry programs and the social justice issues that we have, the Catholic social teachings that we do, working for the common good. All of our service programs emphasize that all of them, no matter what students do in terms of going out and doing service, it is all based in our faith and scriptural reflection and what they're doing. So it is still very much a part of who we are. And it is one of the things that, as Mike mentioned, makes us a very distinctive place. There are only 2 Augustinian schools in the country, so ourselves and Merrimack. So that's something that we can really highlight.
Charles, you want to get that one?
No. Just a further comment for Al. At the time when Father Dobbin stepped down, I just want you to know that the Board of Trustees were adamant that it be another Augustinian as president. So.
And they're still looking for him.
Yeah, Al, I want to address it also because I don't need it, but I'll take it. I think that in addition to what Father Donohue has said, if you look at the curricula of the academic programs and you look at how we market our programs and how we deliver our programs, those concepts, the core values and the Augustinian tradition is there, and it's alive and well, and it's supported, it's encouraged. I know that it's not just in our college or in arts and science where it may seem more obvious, but also in the business school, I'm sure in engineering as well, you're going to find it alive and well and strong.
Hi, my name is Phil Corboy. I'm from Chicago, class of 73. I think there's about half a dozen of us from that class here to this week. Unlike my new best friend, Tony, I do have an opinion about that national versus that regional issue that we talked about. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, I've looked into it. I noticed that the composition of the board, for instance, again, is very Northeast-centric. Mm-hmm. I think, if I remember, there was maybe one board member from the Midwest, but he's a member of the order.
Correct.
Right. No lay people. I don't know. Is there anybody from California or the Western states?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Although that we have a list of people, so as the board rotates, we are more conscious of trying to extend that both nationally and internationally. But there is not, at the present time, most of them are, all but one, are from the East Coast.
When I started here in 1969, I'm pretty sure that the composition of the freshman class was not 60-40. I think it was probably more 90%, 5 and 10 everywhere else. When I came in from Chicago, where I was raised, we probably had, I think, maybe 3 kids in the class that I met that came from Chicago. And when, by the way, when we say Chicago, we mean the entire Midwest area around Chicago, not just Chicago. It was almost, it wasn't lonely as much as it was just very, very strange.
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of this school, acknowledging that it's a great school. I'm a proud alumnus. Everybody I know and I still continue to be friends with that went here is a proud alumnus. Quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, I don't see the upside to wanting to stay #1 with that little asterisk in your name, being #1 at a regional level from the U.S. News and World Report. I've got teenagers. I'm in that group, in that classification of parents where everybody's starting to think about the colleges now. Right, right. And whenever I pick up the U.S. News and World Report to find out a little bit more about what I should know and to help my kids decide where they want to go to school, I go and I see Villanova and I keep on saying to myself, I just hope that they're finally on that national page and they're not 6 pages later in the regional thing. Quite frankly, I don't see an upside to staying as a #1. Could you Help me through that.
It's not necessarily, I don't know if it would be an upside or a downside. It's the reality of where we are right now. And I think that's the important thing. It's not that we don't have the ability to move. It would take us some time because, as I said, we do not control the change in classification. There's a very, very complicated matrix that they go through in terms of making those decisions. But we would have to put certain things into place. And the difficulty right now for us is to economically put those things into place. That we just, it would change for us, at least where we're directing our dollars, to put far more emphasis on research and graduate programs than on undergraduate education. And right now, we have always had this strong belief in the foundation of our undergraduate education. So it would divert a lot of the dollars to building up doctoral programs. And we just don't have and my difficulty with that, or I think as we've discussed this, is creating a doctoral program that carries with it a distinction that people would choose to come, because you're creating a new program. So it's how do you attract people to that? There are a lot of doctoral programs around the country right now at some very fine institutions. But what is it that would be distinctive about our programs? And we have a couple that we know of, that we've looked at, that we would be able to do that. But the resources that we have right now would divert a lot of dollars into creating a very select group of people. In order to move, you need to graduate. One of the big criterias for Carnegie, and Carnegie doesn't rank, it classifies. It's then things like U.S. News World Report, the Princeton Review, Forbes, Business Week, all of those all those publications that rank people that then take those classifications. So U.S. News and World Report would never look at us and say, oh, they're a national school now, because we're just not classified that way. But Carnegie is the one that changes the classification. So they put schools in various components or various classifications, which then the ranking institutions use. One of the big components for that is that we graduate on a yearly basis for a period of time 20 Ph.D. students. And right now we have 3 Ph.D. programs. We have one in philosophy, we have one in nursing, and we have one in engineering. Our numbers are strong. They're not at 20. We would either have to increase the enrollments, the doctoral candidates in those programs, which could happen, or create 2 or 3 new doctoral programs. With that comes a large price tag. And also comes a large refocusing of some very strategic and gifted faculty away from undergraduate teaching and undergraduate work into much more graduate and research work.
It also would not guarantee that we would land where we would like to from a competitive standpoint. When we initially started this whole process, the goal was, could we reach inside the top 40 from a national perspective? And when we looked at all of these costs that Father has mentioned associated with this strategic reclassification, there was no guarantee that we'd be in the top 40. In fact, our most recent analysis showed that we'd be anywhere from 45 to 55, and that actually would put us at a competitive disadvantage from a recruitment standpoint. So because many of those schools who are in that 50 to 55 ranking right now, we already surpass in terms of win rates for those students when they're cross-accepted to both institutions. So as Father pointed out, it's a very highly competitive student recruitment marketplace that we're in, and it would just not be to our competitive advantage if we were to be ranked anywhere from 50 to 55. It would actually hurt us as opposed to staying with this U.S. News and World Report ranking of a #1 master's comprehensive institution.
Whenever I pick up the U.S. News and World Report to find out a little bit more about what I should know to help my kids decide where they want to go to school, I go and I see Villanova and I keep on saying to myself, I I just hope that they're finally on that national page and they're not 6 pages later in the regional thing. Quite frankly, I don't see an upside to staying as a #1. Could you help me through that?
It's not necessarily, I don't know if it would be an upside or a downside. It's the reality of where we are right now. And I think that's the important thing. It's not that we don't have the ability to move. It would take us some time because, as I said, we do not control the change in classification. There's a very, very complicated matrix that they go through in terms of making those decisions. But we would have to put certain things into place. And the difficulty right now for us is to economically put those things into place. That we just, it would change for us, at least where we're directing our dollars, to put far more emphasis on research and graduate programs than on undergraduate education. And right now, we have always had this strong belief in the foundation of our undergraduate education. So it would divert a lot of the dollars to building up doctoral programs. And we just don't have and my difficulty with that, or I think as we've discussed this, is creating a doctoral program that carries with it a distinction that people would choose to come, because you're creating a new program. So it's how do you attract people to that? There are a lot of doctoral programs around the country right now at some very fine institutions. But what is it that would be distinctive about our programs? And we have a couple that we know of that we've looked at that we would be able to do that. But the resources that we have right now would divert a lot of dollars into creating a very select group of people. In order to move, you need to graduate. One of the big criteria for Carnegie, and Carnegie doesn't rank, it classifies. It's then things like U.S. News World Report, the Princeton Review, Forbes, Business Week, all of those all those publications that rank people that then take those classifications. So U.S. News and World Report would never look at us and say, oh, they're a national school now, because we're just not classified that way. But Carnegie is the one that changes the classification. So they put schools in various components or various classifications, which then the ranking institutions use. One of the big components for that is that we graduate on a yearly basis for a period of time 20 Ph.D. students. And right now we have 3 Ph.D. programs. We have one in philosophy, we have one in nursing, and we have one in engineering. Our numbers are strong. They're not at 20. We would either have to increase the enrollments, the doctoral candidates in those programs, which could happen, or create 2 or 3 new doctoral programs. With that comes a large price tag. And also comes a large refocusing of some very strategic and gifted faculty away from undergraduate teaching and undergraduate work into much more graduate and research work.
It also would not guarantee that we would land where we would like to from a competitive standpoint. When we initially started this whole process, the goal was, could we reach inside the top 40 from a national perspective? And when we looked at all of these costs that Father has mentioned associated with this strategic reclassification, there was no guarantee that we'd be in the top 40. In fact, our most recent analysis showed that we'd be anywhere from 45 to 55, and that actually would put us at a competitive disadvantage from a recruitment standpoint. So, because many of those schools who are in that 50 to 55 ranking right now, we already surpass in terms of win rates for those students when they're cross-accepted to both institutions. So, as Father pointed out, it's a very highly competitive student recruitment marketplace that we're in, and it would just not be to our competitive advantage if we were to be ranked anywhere from 50 to 55. It would actually hurt us as opposed to staying with this U.S. News and World Report ranking of a #1 master's comprehensive institution.
Can I just wanted to chime in as a faculty member. I did my undergraduate and doctorate at UCLA, which is in that national ranking picture. The biggest difference that I can tell you from having undergone education at that institution is really the difference in teaching. The biggest thing that I get to do here, which I would never get to do if this were a Research One institution, is interact with my students on a daily, weekly, over email basis. I have a very active research program. In fact, I have 3 books underway in various stages. So the research is not something that I'm concerned about. If I were at a Research One institution, my research portfolio would meet their criteria. The problem is, if I were there, I wouldn't get to teach. And I love these students. And so I can just tell you, from my perspective, hearing your words, I'm thrilled. Because it brings home the fact that I'll get to stay at a 3-2 teaching schedule, not have to move to a 2-2, and I get to be more engaged with my students. So thanks.
And those are the kind of faculty we're hiring, so. Although there's many that would like a 2-2 teaching load, let me tell you.
Hi, Father. If I could just make one observation reflecting on something you said earlier about you and your team, your leadership team, being out and about across the country. I can tell you a very active and vibrant alumni chapter is a great way to reconnect folks to the school. I'm a case in point in that. I moved to Atlanta 4 years ago, and as me and my family moved, we didn't know anybody, and one of the first things we did was connect with the local alumni chapter.
Right.
And that has so strengthened. I am much more involved over the last 4 years, being 800 miles away, than I was when I was more local and 90 miles away, probably because you took it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think there's a great opportunity that these local chapters can do in terms of connecting alumni back to the university and then becoming much more active both financially and other. So I think your leadership and visibility is very helpful.
Thank you.
Maybe one more question.
Steve?
So I had a question about the connectivity to all the alumni. And we talked before, you were talking before about the number of alumni that are out there right now. And I always was curious over the last few years as all the social networking has become online. Do you have contact to all of those, or do you know where they all are? I know that the addresses and all that stuff. And what I was wondering, is there a dedicated office to keep that updated so that you can actually do micro investments and things like that?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of different things that we do, and then I think Gary will chime in from the alumni relations side. We have roughly 55 or 60,000 email addresses, but we have good addresses for about 95% of our alumni base, which is very high for our industry. We do quarterly national change of address updates. We've also, just this past January, conducted a rating and screening of our database. So we're actually looking at all sorts of socioeconomic factors to sort of rate our prospects and rate our database to see those who could be helpful to us. And as part of that, we've done a lot of cleansing of our database as well. And then on the alumni relations side with the Harris Directory.
We also launched this year a social networking initiative, so we're embracing technologies like Facebook and LinkedIn, and that's one of the ways, back to the question about how do we engage alumni worldwide. That's been a marvelous tool. One example is we have one of our social networking groups is Naval ROTC graduates who are obviously all over the world, and they're now, no pun intended, linked in through that, but that's also connected through our office as well. Also very soon we'll launch our alumni directory project, which will reach out to alumni worldwide to update their information. So I think we're doing a very good job at keeping people connected and using the technologies that we have. And we have a great partnership here with our university computing services to help us with the technology support that they can provide.
And that being said, not to suggest that it's a perfectly well-oiled machine, and that's where we need the help of our alumni volunteers and our alumni leaders like you. So the example, Rich, that you gave about the healthcare professional in White Plains, there are lots of alumni, particularly those who could really help. In fact, some of our best prospects are those that are not currently engaged with the university. So our database is only as good as the input that's in there. So social networking is certainly helping us get that. Best practices stuff, national change of address, more frequent rating and screening. We do have a proactive, it's a small but growing research area, dedicated professionals in my department who conduct research on our donors and prospects. But we are reliant to some degree upon, as alumni are making moves, particularly young alumni, as they move around quite a bit, to keep connected. So as much as we can be proactive in trying to stay connected, it has really helped. It has generated that contact, like the good email addresses and the 95% good addresses for our alumni database.
Just before we end this session, I remember John Jones yesterday talking about, you know, acknowledging those people that do great things. And as I said, I have a great staff here, and I have a wonderful group of administrators and faculty and staff that do an incredible amount of work here that make it easy for me to cross that river. But I want to acknowledge, since we're talking about leadership, over the last 15 years, Dr. Johannes has done an incredible job of leading the academic program here. And you may or may not know, but this is his final year in that position, and he's returning to the classroom after 15 years of guiding the academic ship. So I want to thank Jack for everything that he's done. He will be difficult to replace, and but that's another seat on the bus now. So, but thank you all very much. We appreciate your attention.
Before we break, I just wanted to at least make a comment. You know, wearing my Alumni Association hat, I've always said that if Villanova alums know what the facts are and you ask them to step up, they will. And I think the one thing that, you know, perhaps the elephant in the room that we didn't talk about today that I think it's important for you to leave with, if you don't know it, is the great results that we've had academically, financially, operationally. We've done it with a huge arm behind our back, which is our endowment. And you need to know the facts, and the facts are that we compete, and we compete successfully against colleges and universities that have endowments that are multiples of our endowment. I mean, before the stock market correction, how's that for spinning, last fall, I mean, we were, I think, approaching $350 million in terms of our endowment, and competing with schools who have endowments in excess of $1 billion, or Notre Dame at the time, I think, was at $6 billion. And that enables them to give out financial aid to attract students that have you know, the scores that all go into that big hopper in terms of, you know, the rankings, and it's also very important to the lifeblood of the university. And so I think that as all of us as ambassadors, as Mike said, leave today, we have to bear that in mind. And that's where I think we all come in, is to try to keep moving the ball forward, knowing that we still have a lot of work to do in the area of endowment. It's very, very important, and it becomes a competitive advantage or disadvantage depending upon the institution. So that's an important fact that I just thought you needed to know. We're going to take a break now. It's 10:45. We'll come back at 11 o'clock sharp. We'll have our final panel, and then we'll, after that, have lunch, and Coach Jay Wright will be with us for lunch. Thank you.